I be so evasive about it?
Evasive? What do you mean?
As soon as you found out who it was, you moved as far away from me as you could.
I was simply trying not to disturb your reading.
Anyway, what did he want?
He wants to come and spend a few days with us.
Where? Here? When?
The week after next.
You agreed to it without consulting me first.
I could hardly say no.
Why not?
Well, for one thing, he didn't really give me a chance to refuse. He said he could come whenever it was convenient for us, so when he asked when that would be, I said the week after next, which is true.
Yes, but
Besides which, we owe him.
why?
Because of his condescending patronage? Because he mentions us, well, more precisely, you, in interviews with the media? Do you really think he's doing us any favors with those condescending testimonials?
You can't deny its increased demand for our services. We're probably the busiest professors on campus.
Oh, you cannot measure relevance by those criteria. If we measured everything in terms of popularity, we might as well jettison all claim to academic objectivity.
Oh, come on, Lloyd. Are you saying his work has no merit?
Well, generally not as much as he's given credit for. I don't think many of our colleagues are very impressed with his work.
You don't think there might be a little jealousy involved?
Jealousy of whom? Us or him?
Both, perhaps.
I don't think so. Well, anyway, what does he want?
He didn't go into any great detail. He said he just wanted to see us again.
Oh, you mean he wants to see you? It's not exactly like I'm a dear friend of his.
Why do you have such a problem with him?
Oh, I don't have a problem with him. I'd say you're the one with the problem.
Me? Why? What problem?
Well, you're just not your usual self when he's around.
Really? In what way am I different?
Oh, we seem, I don't know, more on edge, more self-conscious. You're just not the same person around him.
You think so?
I do.
I guess he can be a little overwhelming at times.
Overwhelming. I'd say overbearing is more like it. For someone who isn't particularly big from a physical point of view, he seems to occupy a lot of space somehow. I tend to feel claustrophobic when he's in the same room. It's like he's sucking up all the oxygen.
Well, I wouldn't argue with that.
Really? Then why have you allowed him to come and stay with us?
I just find him a difficult person to say no to.
So it seems.
What was I supposed to say?
You could have made up some excuse.
Like what?
Like we're too busy.
That wouldn't have been true. Besides, you know I'm no good at dissembling.
Yes, I'm aware of that. There are times when I wish you were a little bit more successful in hiding things, or at least stretching the truth a little.
What do you mean by that? You've always told me how important it was for us to be totally honest with each other.
Yes, but there are some things that it's not necessarily needing to share with me. There are some things that are best left unsaid.
I suppose you're referring again to the two affairs I had.
Well, let's not get into that.
But you're the one who keeps bringing them up, and I told you they weren't important.
And I'm supposed to believe it was just recreational sex.
No less than your affair with Margaret Wilmot.
Which only happened because you were seeing someone at the time.
And at least I kept my affairs off campus. I didn't exactly flaunt them in your face.
Well, you didn't exactly hide it either. It became quite evident when David Rice and Franz, or what's his name, would call up. You would move as far out of earshot as you could to take their calls. Like you did just now when Elliott phoned. You might as well have had it written on your forehead.
It's always been part of our agreement that we would both...
Yes, I understand it's been part of our agreement that we would have a certain freedom in our personal lives, and I accepted your affairs with David Rice and the German. But as I've told you before, what I couldn't live with is you having an affair with Elliott. It would end things with us for good.
And I told you before that I never had an affair with him, and I have no intentions of having an affair with him.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. Nevertheless, I seem to get the impression that you quite welcome his visit.
Not exactly, no. I do find him an unsettling presence sometimes, but he can be stimulating company at other times.
On a not very elevated level.
I think that's unfair. You underestimate his intelligence.
Oh, he's intelligent enough, But like everything else about him, it's undisciplined.
You can't expect everyone to operate continuously at the highest, most rigorous intellectual level. Otherwise, you'd have to condemn the vast majority of the human race.
Well, I thought you did. I thought we both did. Hasn't it always been our aim to reject the commonplace and to do everything in our power to put everything else under a critical microscope?
Yes, but...
Well, I just do see no good reason to have someone like Elliot Windrush come into our home and disrupt our lives.
Well, it's not like I invited him.
Ah, but you did little to discourage him either.
Oh, okay, look, let's not argue about it anymore. Having him here for a few days is not going to be such a dreadful ordeal. I don't know why you're making such a fuss about it. You say you don't have a problem with it, but everything you've said since his phone call contradicts that.
It's just, I don't like people coming into our home and disrupting our lives and disrupting our routine, that's all. Particularly when I know how unsettling he can be for you. Like after that conference you attended with him last year. You were acting very strangely after that.
Me, what about you? You kept going on about whether or not I was having an affair with him.
Only because you were acting so strangely.
Maybe it was all your questioning that made me uncomfortable.
Should you be uncomfortable if you have nothing to hide?
You were just so suspicious and untrusting, very unlike you. That's what made me uncomfortable.
Oh, well, let's just drop it.
I'd love to.
But as a matter of interest, why is it that you can accept my affairs with David and Franz, but the prospect of the same thing happening with Elliot?
Well, I just see something more serious and distressing than with the other two. I see dangerous problems, for you mainly, but for me indirectly.
Why?
There are some things that are just too complex to pin down in words. All I know is that an affair with Elliot would destroy you and eventually bring me down with it.
Well, that's an interesting piece of music.
It's called doubt.
Ah, I thought I detected an air of uncertainty. Does that reflect your view of my presence here?
Oh, not everything revolves around you, Elliot.
It doesn't? How sad. And how brutally you disillusioned me.
But you still haven't told us what has brought you here.
Oh, haven't I? Well, I'm sure it's a scenario with which you're very familiar.
The vulgar gypsy boy has returned to Wuthering Heights to seek acceptance from those who helped kickstart
And foment his aspirations.
No, this is not Wuthering Heights, Elliot, and you are not Heathcliff. So you've come here seeking our approval? Is that what you're saying?
No. Don't get me wrong. There was a time when I was desperate for your approval. I would have loved to have you and Helen tell me how clever I was and how well you thought my writing was developing, but I've grown beyond that now.
Oh, is this because of your worldly success as a man of letters?
No, it's because I'm no longer in awe of those who toil away in the groves of academe, and it has nothing to do with my success as a writer. Well, not directly, anyway. Of course, I still have tremendous respect for you and Helen. Your opinions are always worth listening to.
Well, how wonderful to hear that.
Sarcasm doesn't really become you, Lloyd, but I do admire and appreciate it. It makes you all the more lovable and human in my eyes. But no, I've soon realized that most academics are slaves to defunct theories that they cling to in an effort to maintain their own academic fiefdoms.
I think I heard your views on that in a television interview you gave.
You actually watch television.
Now who's being sarcastic?
Now, I'm not trying to be sarcastic. It's just, I always imagine you buried in your books and your work with no time for the trivia of television.
Oh, I avoid the trivia of television, but if there's something interesting on...
So you tuned in to watch me being interviewed. Without a shred of sarcasm, I can tell you I find it very gratifying. Did you watch it as well?
Oh no, I'm sure I had something more important to do. But I did hear about it from Helen, about how you believe that academics are, by and large, less concerned with the truth and more concerned with preserving their theories and their academic territory.
Yes, because that's the source of their income, their power, and their influence. Like the high priests of bygone centuries who used Latin to elevate themselves above the masses and maintain power.
Ah, so you see faculty leaders as the high priests of the new society.
Mainly the more pretentious of them, yes. And unfortunately, those are the ones that get all the attention. Now, I know that I've thrown out some sweeping generalizations, but the evidence is all there for anyone who wishes to look for it.
Particularly in the arts and the humanities. In the music world, you have your slaves to Arnold Schoenberg who keep churning out music nobody wants to hear. In the theater, you have your slaves to Stanislavski, who forget the primary function of theater is to entertain, not send people out into the streets to start the next revolution. In almost every field of study, you have people clinging to shaky, defunct theories and then trying to build on them, as if trying to maintain their own academic strongholds.
Oh, so is that how you see Helen and me? As slaves to defunct and misguided theories,
No.
trying to preserve our academic stronghold?
No, if I felt that way, I wouldn't be here, nor would I be singing your praises so often in public if I felt like that. No, you and Helen have more intellectual integrity than anyone I know of.
Why, thank you, Elliot.
But
Oh, there's a but.
But there is one thing that your academic tools are not designed to analyze, detect, or even define very well.
Oh, and what, pray tell, is that?
It's a little thing I like to call organic veracity.
Organic veracity? Well, that's a new one. Kindly explain.
Well, basically it means the fundamental reality of things. That which springs naturally, organically, from the human condition and the given circumstances of any particular time and place.
But surely that's the focus of all study.
Well, yes. But I've learned that I can cut through all the noise and the static and get right to the core of things in a way that many academics are simply unable to do. I think it's part of what's made me such a successful writer.
Oh, and I always thought your success was based more on the exotic sex scenes and the intrigue that you inject into your novels.
Now, you see, this is why I really came here. Because you will not let me get away with anything. Even someone with a monstrously inflated ego like mine has to be brought down to earth every now and again. It's such a change from the fawning and flattery of the big city. You are a sobering splash of cold water to the face, Lloyd. A breath of fresh air.
Ah, so that's why you've come here, so we can throw cold water in your face, metaphorically speaking. Of
Well, that
course.
is to enjoy your stimulating conversation.
Oh, well, I don't see that as a fundamental part of life. Throwing cold water in your face, I mean. It would just take up too much time. But, speaking of fresh air, it's time for my daily constitutional. So, if you'll excuse me, I'll see you later.
Was it something I said?
I think he just finds you a little overwhelming.
Me. Shy, retiring me.
You unsettle him.
Why?
Partly because he thinks you have an unsettling effect on me.
do you think I have an unsettling effect on you?
I think you know the truth to that, but I'd rather not talk about that right now. So what's the real reason for your visit, Elliot?
You sound suspicious, as if you thought I had some ulterior motive.
To tell the truth, I'm not sure.
Well, it's absolutely true what I told Lloyd about wanting to get away from the craziness of the big city. Matter of fact, I'm looking to purchase a home here.
Really?
Yes. Do you remember the old white colonnaded building up on the hill behind campus?
You mean the old Reynolds property?
That's the one. You know, it was always the height of my social aspirations to live in that house. And now it's become a possibility for me. More than a possibility. In about a week or so, I shall be the new owner. Just like Heathcliff when he acquired Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange. Does that surprise you?
Yes.
Well, I think the time has come for me to settle down.
That surprises me even more. Are you even capable of that?
Do you doubt it?
As a matter of fact, I do.
But I guess it depends on what you mean by settling down. I suppose there are different concepts of what that means. Everything is relative, isn't it?
I mean it in the traditional, unadorned sense of what it means to settle down with someone. A home. Someone I love to share it with. Children, the works.
I just can't see it somehow. You've always gone through life like a runaway express train, leaving all kinds of chaos in your wake, and no doubt at least a few broken hearts. Every time I see or hear about you, there's a new woman in your life, and didn't I read it somewhere that you once confessed having a low boredom threshold when it comes to sex?
Did I say that? Well, I'm sure it must be because they simply weren't the right woman for me.
I've also heard it suggest that your sexual escapades haven't been confined to just women. Is there any truth to that?
Well, you do all kinds of things when you're bored.
I just can't see you settling down somehow.
Well, I think you're wrong, but I won't argue with you about it. Is there any more wine to offer? And there she weaves by night and day, a magic web with colors gay. She has heard a whisper say, a curse is on her if she stay to look down to Camelot. She knows not what the curse may be, and so she weaveth steadily, and little other care hath she, the Lady of Shalott. One of the great narrative poems of all time.
Or is it a little too treacly for your taste?
No, I agree with your assessment. It has a very haunting quality.
It does, doesn't it?
And moving through a mirror clear that hangs before her all the year, shadows of the world appear. There she sees a highway near, winding down to Camelot. There the river eddy whirls, and there the surly village churls, and the red cloaks of market girls pass onward from Shalott. Da 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 da, ah, ha, 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 ha. But here is one of my favorite verses. But in her web she still delights to weave the mirror's magic sights, for often through the silent nights a funeral with plumes and lights and music went onward to Camelot. For when the moon was overhead came two young lovers, lately wed. I'm half sick of shadows, said the Lady of Shalott. And there, amid her ivory tower and dreaming spires of academe, she sat, weaving her observations of the world and its art, but keeping it at a distance, so that she might not be contaminated by the disorder and the chaos and the depravity of the world she saw reflected in her mirror.
Oh.
And moving through a mirror clear that hangs before her all the year, shadows of the world appear. There she sees a highway near, winding down to Camelot. There the river eddy whirls, and there the surly village churls, and the red cloaks of market girls pass onward from Shalott. And, but here is one of my favorite verses. But in her web she still delights to weave the mirror's magic sights, for often through the silent nights a funeral with plumes and lights and music went onward to Camelot. For when the moon was overhead came two young lovers, lately wed. I'm half sick of shadows, said the Lady of Shalott. And there, amidst her dreaming towers and ivory spires of academe, she sat, observing the nature of the world and its art, keeping it at a distance, so that she might not become contaminated by the depravity and the disorder and the chaos of the world that she saw reflected in her mirror.
All right. There may be some truth to that if you're applying that to me.
Of course I'm applying it to you. And are you not half sick of shadows, my Lady of Shalott?
The shadows are all out there, not in here.
And the world outside, your cloistered domain.
Yes, I admire how you seem to be able to wade through it all and come away seemingly unscathed. I couldn't do it.
And so you remain here, buried in your work.
If you wish to put it in those terms.
Have you managed to do any writing of your own lately? I mean, creative writing.
I guess you could say I embody the old saying that those who can't do it end up teaching.
And what an excellent teacher you are, too.
Thank you.
But I'm sure you have all kinds of wonderful things that could flower into some glorious blooms if you could just shuttle off these self-imposed constraints you forced on yourself. Your problem, I think, is that everything gets weighted down under this burden of academic theory that it leaves no room for natural growth.
Would you care to elaborate on that?
I became so engrossed about how my writing was developing and how you thought it would fit or didn't fit with what good writing should be that it nearly killed my own work. It does tend to put a straitjacket on one's productive energies.
Are you saying I intimidated you intellectually?
I guess you could say that, yes.
I didn't realize I had that kind of effect on you.
I didn't want you to know. It does tend to put a straitjacket on one's productive energies.
Are you saying I intimidated you intellectually?
I guess you could say that, yes.
I didn't realize I had that kind of effect on
I
you.
didn't want you to know. If I had let on for a moment, it would have given you freedom to walk all over me.
Do you really think I would have done that?
I don't think it, I know it. When it comes to matters of intellect, you're not exactly one to take prisoners.
I think you're distorting the reality of it. I just like things to be clear in other people's heads as well as mine. I think it's important to examine things from all sides. I just don't like leaving any untidy ends.
But there's one side of things that you never look at.
And what is that?
The
There
organic.
you go again with the organic label. It seems to be your favorite word.
And it seems to be your least favorite concept or perspective.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
I'm talking about the way things feel in here. Your gut feeling. And right here. In other words, the visceral. The feelings that come from deep within you without any fear of academic filters.
Why do I constantly get the feeling that you're trying to steer me into waters I would prefer to avoid?
Maybe because that's exactly what I'm trying to do?
Well, I wish you wouldn't.
Well, I'm trying to be subtle about it.
Subtlety has never been your strong point. At least not in your direct dealings with people. You're about as subtle as a bull on steroids.
Well, blatant be my name. Ah well, I tried. Do you still play?
Not so much these days.
Well, how often, or how seldom?
Hardly ever.
Since when?
I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Well, that can only date back to just before the conference. I remember you used to play quite often before then. There was one song in particular that you were rather fond of. It was this song that inspired me to take up the piano myself. It showed me that secret, hidden, romantic side of you. I so desperately wanted to learn to play it too. I always imagine a duet between us. Me playing the bottom half with augmented chords, and you playing the top with high trills and other embellishments.
Please, Elliot, I'd be grateful if you'd stop playing.
Why, is my playing that bad?
There's nothing wrong with you playing. It just reminds me of some things I would prefer to forget.
Things concerning me.
I wish you wouldn't ask me such questions.
But it's important for me to
Please,
know,
Elliot,
Helen.
don't. I can't handle it.
Well, I would hate to think of you shutting off any more of your senses, or that I might even be remotely responsible
If you
for it.
continue in this vein, you'll force me to shut down completely. At least where it concerns any conversation between us.
Very well.
What are you playing now?
It's the introduction to a song I wrote.
You've taken up songwriting.
Not exactly. It's a one-off. I composed it one night during a particularly vacuous cocktail party, one that I was obliged to attend. I was a little drunk and feeling melancholy with a need for a bit more personal meaning in my life. But this is not the time for melancholy, so I will not inflict my singing on you.
I must admit, it's a side of you never expected, a composer of melancholy songs.
Yes, well, I'm sure there are sides we all wish to keep hidden from the world.
It's not like you to hide things, though. You're probably the most direct person I've ever met in my life.
Yes, well, this song is, it's very private. It's not exactly profound. Some might even call it sugary or trite in its sentiment, but
It really does have a deep personal meaning for me. I've never shared it with anyone. Actually, you're the only person that I feel comfortable enough to share it with.
Really? Well, I must admit you've piqued my curiosity. But there's a dilemma. On the one hand, I'm interested in hearing it, but on the other hand, I'm afraid to.
Well, let's leave it alone for a moment, and let me ask, if I may, how are you and Lloyd getting on these days?
Same as ever, I guess.
You've been together, what, 20 years now? Ever since you were a student of his?
To tell the truth, I've lost count. We don't celebrate anniversaries.
Because it's not that kind of relationship.
Not a romantic relationship, if that's what you mean, no.
Which is why you never married?
Neither of us could see the point of getting married. We were not intending to have children together. And we agreed from the start that we would not have children.
You never wanted children.
The issue has never arisen.
That doesn't exactly answer my question.
I have never had any burning desire to have children. Does that answer your question?
Just with Lloyd or with anyone?
There's no point in desiring what you cannot have.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you incapable of conceiving children?
Physically, no. I don't think there's anything to stop me from having children. Lloyd is incapable of fathering them. He had an operation many years ago to make sure of it.
And whose idea was that? Yours or his?
It was a mutual decision. We didn't think children were a good idea, so we agreed that one of us would be sterilized to prevent it from happening.
So, in effect, after his operation, he became your eunuch.
I don't know. What makes you say that? If you're implying that we have a sexist relationship, you're quite wrong. Lloyd is very capable in the bedroom, believe it or not. Does that surprise you?
A little bit, yes. If he's such a lion in bed, then why do you feel the need to take up liaisons with others? I mean, the German guy and the other one. Does Lloyd know about that?
Yes, we're quite open with each other.
Does that mean he knows about what happened with us at the conference?
No. He had his suspicions, but I haven't told him anything. All I told him is that we were not having an affair and never would, which is true. One moment of madness and then amount to an affair.
Is that how you see it, a moment of madness?
Yes, I do. And nearly drove me mad afterwards.
But why? It's not as if you were drunk or on drugs when it happened.
You know, I'm sorry, I don't want to go there. I thought that I made that quite
But
clear.
it's very important for me to know, Helen, you've never given me a satisfactory explanation to your side of things. Anytime it's brought up, you just brush it aside, saying it's too painful to discuss or think about.
Because it is too painful to discuss or think about. Are you so insensitive that you cannot see that?
Do you not see how painful it is for me not knowing?
I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for you. At least nothing that makes much sense or will satisfy. Just put it down to the fact that I am not cut out for passion or romance.
I don't believe that. I saw a completely different side of you that night, and I believe the person I saw was the real you.
You can believe what you like, but I cannot be the person you want me to be, Elliot. You have to believe me on that and just accept it as fact.
So does it all boil down to the lover and eunuch scenario?
The what?
A few years ago, a woman friend told me a fact about women that very few men would understand or even know about. She said that most women, heterosexual women at least, share a secret common fantasy. There were many variations on it, but they all involved a lover and a eunuch. Sometimes more than one. The eunuch would prepare the woman for her lover, and this was the most exciting and fulfilling part of the fantasy. The lover became almost redundant. You see, it's the eunuch that she loves, because of the unconditional love that he offers her. If it ever came down to a battle between lovers and eunuchs, the eunuchs will always win.
If that's a common fantasy among women, I must be an exception to the rule.
Yes, I know you're an exceptional woman in many ways, but I couldn't help wondering
What?
if what happened between us was just a variation on the fantasy, and whether I was always destined to lose out to the eunuch.
It's not like that at all, and I keep telling you, Lloyd is not a eunuch. Far from it.
Just tell me one thing. Do you love him?
I'm not in love with him, if that's what you mean. I never have been.
So what is it that keeps you together? May I ask? Your work? The fact that he helped you become one of the youngest professors in this college's history? A habit you fell into from the time you were a student of his? A combination of these things, or is there something more?
We have other shared interests apart from our work.
Like what?
A love of nature. Walks in the countryside, similar tastes in food and decor, as well as literature, that sort of thing.
All right. This is the song that I wrote. You may find it embarrassingly sentimental, and my singing may not be quite up to par, but I do feel like I have to share this with you. I can't forget that one special night we had clinging together out in the rain. I saw a side of you I've never seen. I'm longing to see that woman again. Holding you close and lying beside you, I found such tenderness deep in your eyes. Having been kept until then at a distance, it was a most unexpected surprise. And in that look, it seemed that at last I'd found what had eluded me all of my life. Two total opposites coming together. I knew then and there I would make you my wife. Pretty corny, huh?
No, it wasn't corny. Nothing as obviously heartfelt as that could be described as corny. Helen, what am I to do? You're right, I do owe you an explanation. I'm sorry if I hurt you, but this whole thing's just been too painful for me. I'll have some more wine.
We need another bottle. I'll just go get one from the kitchen.
The reason I had to end things and stop seeing you for a while was that what happened that night had terrible consequences I couldn't have foreseen. I guess I thought I could handle things the way I did with the other two, David and Franz, and not get too involved, stay within my comfort zone, but I found that wasn't the case at all.
Really?
It's just unbearable.
What was?
The jealousy, the fear,
The jealousy of what? Of me?
I never felt that way about anyone or anything before. It was awful, unbearable. I couldn't take it. It almost drove me to a nervous breakdown.
But I don't understand. There was never anything to be jealous of. Ever since that night, you've been the only person in my thoughts.
Really?
Yes.
Really doesn't make a difference.
Why not?
Because the effect it had on me left no room for rational thought or action. My whole capacity for reasoning went out the window. I felt like I was being pulled apart and I was coming apart at the seams, and I was just so torn between my desire for independence, my relationship with Lloyd, and the overwhelming desire to give myself to you completely.
But that is what I've been dreaming of. Us giving ourselves to each other completely.
But the way I wanted it wasn't a healthy, normal way. I wanted to in the most craven, submissive, and utterly abandoned way you could possibly imagine.
And there is nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with giving yourself to the person you care for. And Lord knows I care for you very
The
deeply.
whole thing just terrified me. It still does. It's like...
Like what?
I've heard some women describe their first approach to sexual orgasm as something akin to preparing to jump off the edge of a cliff. And
Yes, I'm very familiar with the analogy, but are you trying to tell me you've never experienced an orgasm?
No. Lloyd has never had any problem bringing me a sexual climax. On the other hand, I've never experienced with him the sense of going over the edge of a cliff and being terrified if I would survive the fall, or perhaps even more terrified, the thought that
What?
the thought that I could end up like a drug addict, becoming so desperate for you that I would lose all self-respect and rational thought. That's how bad it is for me. That's what I think would happen if I gave in to my urges as far as you're concerned, and then my whole world would disintegrate and me with it. Lloyd senses it too. He said that if I had an affair with you, it would destroy me and him along with it, and I think he's right.
But what if I could promise you that there would never be any cause for jealousy? That there would be no one else but you, that I would always be there to catch you.
Don't you see? It's not something open to rational considerations. Jealousy doesn't need anything to feed on but itself. I know that. I can see it inside me. I don't like what I see.
And what if I welcomed your jealousy? What if I embraced it, as well as your submissiveness and all the other urges you're hiding from? What if it all just nourished my love for you?
Don't ask me such questions, Elliot. I don't have an answer for you. I told you, I don't have any self-control or rational thought as far as you're concerned.
Then maybe I should do the thinking for both of us.
Oh, that terrifies me as much as anything else.
You don't trust me enough?
I don't trust myself. I don't trust my judgment. I don't trust that I can make those kinds of decisions, including the decision for you to do the thinking for us.
So what happens now?
Nothing, I hope. I just want things to go back to normal.
I don't.
Elliot, don't.
Helen, I have to.
No, I have no self-control. Please don't take advantage of my...
I'm sorry. I just can't help myself.
I think you need to leave me alone for a little while. I've got to get myself together before Lloyd gets better.
I'll just go see how the arrangements for the purchase of my new home are coming along. Morning, Lloyd!
Hello, Elliot.
Is Helen not up yet?
No, she's not feeling too well.
Really? Well, I'm sorry to hear that. What's the problem? Too much to drink last night?
Oh, I think it's more than that.
Really?
Look, Elliot, I think it might be best if you do not continue to stay here.
Oh, really? Why?
Because of the effect you seem to be having on Helen.
What effect?
She was noticeably upset yesterday when I got back from my constitutional. And last night, she drank much more than is usual for her. It was the same after she attended that literary conference with you. Something seems to be happening between you two, and whatever it is, I don't like it.
Nothing is happening between us.
Oh, I think there is.
To tell you the truth, I wish there was. I love her. And if I could, I would take her into my arms and whisk her away from here. But she won't allow it.
Well, thank you for being honest at least, but I've suspected that for a long time. In fact, it became evident not long after you began studying with us. I think I could see something between you before either of you did. I could see what was coming. I could see the effect your energy was having on her, and I could see the same thing happening in reverse.
So you want me to disappear?
I think it would be best under the circumstances.
Just for now, or out of your lives completely?
I think it would be better if we avoided contact in the future. You just upset her so.
What? Have you spoken to Helen about this?
She really wasn't in a state last night to discuss anything sensibly, which only underscores my point. And I really don't see the need to discuss it with her first. That would just upset her more.
Well, Lloyd, I admit it would pain me to not see either of you again. But if I felt like it was in Helen's best interest, then I wouldn't hesitate.
Well, that's very good.
However, before I agree to anything, there's a few things that I would like to sound you out about first.
Such as?
As I hope you know, I've always liked you as an individual and as an intellect, somebody with a lot to offer.
Thank you.
But I can't. What I'm trying to say is there have just been some nagging reservations I've had about you in the back of my mind.
Oh, yes? And what might they be?
They concern your influence on Helen when she was younger. She was what, 16, 17 when she first became your student?
She just barely turned 17. Yeah, she just missed out on being my youngest student ever.
She was what you might call a prodigy.
Oh, she was, yes.
You know, about 3 years back, I had an affair with a former child prodigy. Her IQ was off the scale. It was so high, they couldn't measure it. All they could do was tell her that she was in the top 0.02% of the population. Anything she studied, it was prodigious. She was a living encyclopedia. She was always the top of her class. But emotionally and socially, she was like a 3-year-old. She didn't know how to read people. She didn't know how to behave in crowds. She became just full of negative energy. A succubus that would drain you of any positive thought or feeling if it wasn't for the fact that she came from a very influential family and was quite strikingly beautiful. Very few people would have even bothered. Now, originally I took this as a challenge, but it only took me about 3 weeks before I gave up.
Well, that's all very interesting, Elliot, but what does it have to do with Helen or me?
It just goes to show that no matter how intelligent you are, no matter how much of a prodigy you may be, it does not guarantee maturity of judgment in one's personal life.
No, I wouldn't argue with that. So your point is?
My point is, I believe that Helen might have been very impressionable and vulnerable when she first came under your wing.
Oh, so that's it, I might have guessed. I'm sure you're not the first person to indulge in such speculation. But if you're trying to infer that I abused my position of authority and took advantage of an innocent and impressionable young woman, you are completely wrong. In fact, the truth is quite the opposite of what you're implying.
The opposite in what way?
Oh, you're very right that Helen was impressionable and vulnerable at that point. In fact, she still is. As a matter of fact, I can see that she's vulnerable to you. I could see it back then. I could see, how fragile she was and how easily she could be hurt or even destroyed by someone like you. Someone with such raw animal energy and visceral sensibilities. Someone with a wildness that has no regard for people's vulnerability and sensitivity.
Wow. Here I thought you had some regard for me.
Oh, I do. In some ways, I quite admire you. Even like you. Well, a little anyway. Or at least there have been occasions when I've enjoyed your company. But you have never been someone I have wanted to get close to
And
or to have as a friend.
What was this you were saying about disregard for people's sensitivities?
Oh, you're not going to pretend to be wounded,
No,
are you?
I'm just gonna let it wash all over me like the insensitive brute you imagine me to be. I would hate to disillusion you by showing any vulnerability.
Oh, how very considerate.
You have really got to do something about your sarcasm, Lloyd. It just doesn't become you. You do recall it being the lowest form of wit? Or do you just reserve that for the lowest forms of humanity?
Oh, I would never put you in that category, Elliot.
Thank you. But I want now to return to your relationship with Helen and how it became more than a teacher and her student. You were suggesting that you wanted to protect her from insensitive bastards like me. Is that what you're getting at? Is that what this is leading up to?
Oh, it was more than that.
Did the fact that she was physically attractive have anything to do with it?
Not in itself, no. Oh, I won't deny that it contributed to my interest in her, but my main interest was in her mind and in the gift she had for the critical analysis of literature. I wanted to nurture that gift and to protect her from anything that stood in the way of her reaching the full flowering of her
And
talents.
what about the full flowering of the whole woman?
What about it? I think her achievements speak for themselves.
Helen may have achieved academic potential, but what about her potential as a woman and as a creative writer?
What about them?
For as long as I have known her, Helen's expressed a desire to produce some creative writing of her own. It's something she's yet to do, even though I am convinced that she has it in her.
Well, as you yourself have pointed out, the weight of critical analysis can be a barrier to creativity. Perhaps they don't go together. Or are you blaming me?
I'm simply wondering how much of her wider potential has been stifled in the process of her becoming your intellectual concubine and the youngest professor in this college's history. Obviously, she's learned a lot from you. You helped her become one of the most respected critics in the nation, but what else has she learned from you? Did she learn to fear inner impulses? Did she learn to fear love and passion and all the things that go along with it?
Oh, if you're talking about the wilder shores of passion where mindless emotion and animal urges and cheap sentiment are allowed to run rampant and unchecked, I make no apology for doing my best to steer her away from such areas. That way madness lies.
You observe everything around the edges of life. You are stuck in a glass bubble which you hide away from the world. You don't even so much as dip a toe into the sea of life for fear of becoming contaminated with what might be lying beneath the surface.
Oh, so we should all be getting down and getting dirty, is that what you're advocating? We should all wallow in the
I
mud?
am talking about being human, about allowing Helen to be human.
So you would see me as a restrictive influence on her view, as someone stopping her from being completely human, as a Svengali figure,
As a matter of
perhaps.
fact, I'm starting to see you as one of those sternly Victorian father figures, just like Elizabeth Barrett Browning's father, who stifled her so badly that she became a bedridden invalid till she was rescued by Robert Browning.
Oh, and how do you see yourself? As the gallant poet coming in to rescue the woman he loves from the oppression of a father figure? Or perhaps as the noble prince trying to free Rapunzel from her tower by getting her to let down her hair. Is that the scenario you imagine
I'd
here?
have to admit, I would love to unshackle her from your influence and see what happens.
And what do you think would happen? That she'd fall in your arms, run away with you, and the two of you would live happily ever after?
Yeah, something like that. Now, of course you're gonna say I'm naive, and I know the consequences will be a little bit more complex than that. Nevertheless, I would love to give Helen the chance to love and be loved with a passion unfettered by being human.
And you think I haven't tried to give her that? I am sure the love I've offered her is a lot less restrictive and a lot more unselfish than any kind of love you have to offer. I imagine you wanting to see her naked and barefoot in the kitchen.
No! I want to see her flourish in all kinds of ways. If she wanted children, I would love to give her children. Is that something you ever offered her?
We agreed from the start that our work would come first. Besides, she's never once had expressed a wish to have children.
Did you even ask her?
Well, I'm sure I did. I have always tried to accommodate her desires as best I could. I've tried not to stifle her. I have given her relative free rein in her personal life, even when it involved having affairs with other men.
Yes, I know about them.
You do?
Helen's not very good at hiding things, is she?
No, she isn't.
Oh, that's part of her charm.
Well, it wasn't a very comfortable experience for me, but I put up with it.
And you couldn't put up with something like that involving me?
Oh, no, I couldn't. I wouldn't.
Why not?
Because I know you would break her. She couldn't handle you. The reputation you have for hurting the women you get involved with has reached almost legendary proportions.
Those reports have always been exaggerated. Besides, what I feel with Helen is different from what I felt with the other two.
Well, excuse me if I'm skeptical.
Well, what is it about me that disturbs you so much?
There is a restlessness about you that suggests you will never find peace or satisfaction with anyone or anything. Oh, look at how you pace the room. You're like a caged lion. You can't sit still for more than a minute or two. It shows in your writing, too. Why, you virtually admitted to the press that you are, what are the words? A ship without an anchor.
Without a harbor.
There you are.
But I have always added in that I've been longing for an anchor and a port to come home to.
And how many hopeful women did you flaunt, and how many of them, after you were finished with them, did you abandon?
When you're desperate, you take what you can get.
But you think things would be different with Helen?
I know they would.
You think she's going to give you the harbor or the anchor?
I know that if I had Helen, I wouldn't want anyone else.
It's very touching of you. And I mean that sincerely.
Elliot has just been telling me how he'd like to sweep you up and run away with you if he had the chance.
I know, I heard.
How long have you been listening in?
Since shortly after Elliot came down from his room.
In other words, you heard everything. Lloyd said you weren't feeling well.
I had a migraine, but it's gone now. I'd like some time with Elliot alone, if you don't mind. Maybe this would be a good time to go for your daily constitutional.
I think I'd rather stay here and listen to what you have to say to each other. I think we have some sorting out to do, the three of us.
That won't be necessary. Don't worry. I'll still be here when you get back. If you'd be kind enough to disappear for an hour or two, I'd be most grateful.
Look, I really don't like the idea of leaving you alone with him at this particular juncture. After everything you've heard us say to each other, and I believe I'm entitled to be privy to anything you have to say to each other, since it is going to involve me. Besides, I don't much like being banished from my own house. even if it is for an hour or two.
If you won't trust me on this and insist on staying here, we will simply have to go somewhere else.
You sound very dictatorial all of a sudden.
Do you go or do we?
Very well. I will go.
Give us 2 hours.
Oh, I have a feeling that I'm not gonna like what you're about to say.
Why is that?
He's told Lloyd not to worry, that he'd still be here when he got back. It sounds to me like I'm about to get the brush off. Now I know that you're going to do it with charm and grace and consideration, but in the end it just means I lose out to the eunuch, right?
I wish you would start referring to him that way. And I wish you wouldn't try to put interpretations on what I want to say before you even heard what I'm about to tell you.
I'm sorry.
So you should be. And rest assured, I'm not going to give you the brush off.
Really?
Doesn't mean I'm going to let you sweep me off my feet and run away with me either, however tempting that might be.
But
But I think everything's going to be okay for all
I
three
don't
of us.
understand
Please
what-
let me talk to you interrupted first, though. Well, things are still clear in my mind. Thank you. I had the most splitting headache when I woke up this morning. And it wasn't just the effect of all the drink I had last night. It was quite different from any migraine I've ever had before. I had a vision of synopsis in my brain realigning themselves and making new connections. It was the most peculiar sensation. And then all of a sudden the headache lifted. And I felt I could see everything with a clarity I've never experienced before. It suddenly felt as if a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders, and I felt liberated in a way I've never known.
When you say
And it's all thanks to you. You and that corny song you composed for me.
Ouch. You said there wasn't anything corny about it.
That was your description, not mine. To me, it was the most wonderful thing you could have given me. And how many women have a song written about them? It made me feel so special.
You are special.
But more importantly, it puts everything between us in a whole new light. After my headache lifted, I felt I could embrace all those feelings that disturbed me so long after the conference and not be afraid of them any longer. I could hold them up to the daylight and accept them as an indivisible part of my love for you.
That's wonderful.
It is wonderful. The gift of your love and my love for you is the most precious thing there is. It's something that I will cherish and hold on to my whole life.
That makes two of us.
So let us seal it with a kiss.
So, where does that leave us as far as living arrangements are concerned?
My dear, I'd love to be swept up in your arms and run away with you.
Why don't we do just that?
It's a lovely thought, but I can't.
Why not? Why not do something rash and impulsive for once in your life?
Because it would destroy what we have. What you have given me is too precious to be squandered in a moment of wild abandon. Whatever we do, we have to make sure nobody is hurt in the process.
You mean Lloyd?
No, not just Lloyd. I'm talking about you too. And myself. If I just abandon
You
Lloyd,
don't have to abandon
but
him.
that's what running away with you would amount to. He'd be deeply hurt if I did that.
And I'd be deeply hurt if you didn't.
I don't think so, somehow. A force of nature like you.
I'm a lot more vulnerable than you think. Particularly when you're concerned.
I think I realized that from your song. You were right about me closing down my senses before, which is one of the reasons I stopped playing the piano. But for the first time in my life, I feel like a complete woman. Although I never realized before there was anything missing. That's what frightened me so much about the night of the conference. I became aware of this yearning inside me that longed to be filled, and I felt that I would betray myself as a woman if I gave in to those urges and that my whole world would disintegrate. But now I realize I have nothing to fear. And the one thing I know for certain is we have to make sure we do the right thing if we're not to destroy this love we have for each other.
And what do you see as the right thing?
When you have something as special as the gift of your love and my love for you, it makes everything else in life that much easier to bear. And it makes it that much easier to do the right thing.
You still haven't told me what that is. Apart from not hurting Lloyd.
But that's what it basically comes down to, at least to begin with. The thing is that Lloyd has loved me without any reservation, and it's troubled me to some extent that I've never been able to return that love. I do feel that I owe him. If I didn't do something to return my debt to him, I know that it'll rebound on both of us. You and me, I mean. Lloyd is 63 now. His parents died in the early 60s. Did we ever tell you about his parents?
Not that I recall.
They weren't very nice people. At least not to him. He had a terrible childhood.
And I'm very sorry to hear that. But pity is a terrible basis for a relationship. My mother stayed with my father out of pity, and it destroyed her life. He didn't even earn her his respect in the end. He just took it all for granted.
It's not so much pity as admiration I have for Lloyd. For having overcome his awful childhood and made something of himself. It's something I admire in you too. The way you've risen so far from your modest beginnings with so little help from anyone.
You were a big help with that. And Lloyd too, to give him his due.
Thank you. Anyway, the point is that none of Lloyd's family lived beyond their 60s, so heaven only knows how much longer he has to live. He seems quite healthy now, but who knows what tomorrow will bring. Whatever happens, I have to see him out, Elliot. I have to be there for him. It's the least I can do. Compared to what you and I found from each other, it's little enough.
What you just said, about for the first time feeling like a complete woman,
Yes.
doesn't that make you want what other women traditionally wanted? A home, a husband, children? It's not too late, you know. Women are having perfectly healthy babies well into their 40s.
It may not be too late for me biologically, but it's too late for me in other ways.
Because of having to stay with Lloyd.
That and my work. Having children now would bring a huge disruption in my life. I'm not sure I can cope with it now, even if there were no other complications. But I am convinced that our love will eventually bear offspring.
Are you speaking of a time when Lloyd is dead?
No, and don't be so morbid. Anyways, whatever happens by then, we'll just have to wait and see. Who knows? You might be married to somebody else by then and have
No.
children of your own.
I know there won't be anyone else for me but you.
I hope so. But I don't want to stand in the way of your happiness. If you want children...
I don't want children for the sake of wanting children. It has to be with someone that I truly love. And that's you.
Good. Because to be honest, the selfish part of me would be mortified if you had children with somebody else.
But what did you mean when you said that our love would bear offspring eventually?
As you will know, it's always been my ambition to create a literary work of my very own. Well, I think you have planted the seeds of one inside of me. And you have freed me from all the inhibitions and self-conscious that have prevented me from doing so to begin with. I even have a theme. Now it's just a matter of nursing it along and letting it develop.
And what is your theme?
It's based on the poem you read me yesterday, The Lady of Shalott. It's about a woman, a painter perhaps, who can't engage directly with the world outside, but paints only what she sees through the prism of her art. That is, until she meets her own Sir Lancelot and begins to pursue him.
And does it end in her doom, like in the poem?
We will just have to wait and see. How can I let it achieve organic veracity if I'm to force it with a foregone conclusion?
Organic veracity? That sounds a little pretentious to me.
That is what I thought too when I first heard the term used by a rather opinionated writer who thought that his success in the literary world made him infallible.
Well, anyway, I wish you all the luck in the world. You and your Lady of Shalott.
Thank you. Now, let's make love before Lloyd gets back.
That's the first time I've heard you playing the piano in quite some time.
Yes, it's been far too long.
Well, you haven't lost your touch. You play that most eloquently.
Thank you.
So, where's Elliot?
He left.
I know, I saw him go. But where's he gone? Or more to the point, is he coming back?
No, not for some time at least. And he's decided not to buy the old grounds place after all.
Oh.
Yeah, he thought it might be Too close for comfort.
For whom? Him, you, or me?
All three of us. He thought it would be undiplomatic, shall we say, not that his feelings about me are out in the open.
And what about your feelings for him?
What about them?
Well, I'm still not sure what they are, or how I fit into it.
You can rest assured that you have nothing to worry about. I'm not going to run away with him. I'm far too settled here with you, and I intend to remain so.
Well, if it wasn't for me and you being settled, would you go and live with him?
I'm not sure. Maybe not. I cannot see us living together somehow, no matter what the circumstances. Being attracted to someone and living with them are two very different things.
So you admit being attracted to him,
Yes, I never denied that I was.
but you never admitted it either. You were always skirting the issue.
Didn't you lecture me only 2 weeks ago about
Yes,
keeping some
but-
things to myself?
Something's changed.
What's changed?
You, your whole demeanor. Before, when I'd question you about Elliot, especially after the convention, you would become edgy and abrasive, very unsettled, like you were yesterday. Oh, last night, so much drinking. If there's such a thing as a personal aura, yours has changed. From a dark blue to a gentle pink. There's a glow and a calmness about you I've not seen before.
Perhaps the change you see in me is due to the fact that I am no longer unsettled by him. It's true that after the conference, or maybe long before that, I began to have feelings about him that upset my entire equilibrium and deeply disturbed me. But that is no longer the case, and he poses no threat to our relationship. So let us just leave it at that and get on with our lives as best we can.
One question, if you don't mind. Do you plan to see him again?
I have no immediate plans to do so, but I have no long-term plans not to. I will not go out of my way to see him, but I will also not go out of my way to avoid him. As I keep telling you, he poses no threat to our life together.
Very well. No more questions. Oh, except for one, on a different subject.
What's that?
I'm going to make some coffee. Would you like a cup?
Not right now, thank you. I'd like some more time on the piano. I have a lot of catching up to do.
All right, I'll leave you to it.